Okay, I'm going to get started with just an introduction, then we'll move over to our panelists. So first, my name is Kate Russell. I'm the director of the Neurodiversity Employment Network here in Philadelphia, and we are just so thrilled to have you here today. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and really just thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us. If you're unfamiliar with the Neurodiversity Employment Network, our mission is to be a network that connects employers, academics, providers, vendors, job seekers, and other allies in the greater Philadelphia region who all support one another to enable neurodivergent individuals to gain meaningful employment. We do this in three main ways. The first is through quarterly large group meetings where we get together for speakers, sharing knowledge, and networking. The next of which is going to be on January 25th. So save the date if you're in the greater Philadelphia area. The second is a centralized resource listing. So we're consistently trying to build out our website to be a place where you can come for information on neurodiversity and employment. So whether you're a job seeker, an employer, or a provider, you can find what you need on that website. The third is by making individual connections. So for any of you who are here today who are looking to take that next step in whatever position you may be, again, if you're an employer, a job seeker, a vendor, we are happy to connect one-on-one with you and connect you with others in our network who are all interested in meeting each other and collaborating together. I want to note that today we are focusing specifically on autism because this is funded by the Philadelphia Autism Project. So we thank them for their funding and allowing us to put on this webinar series. I'm going to stop share here. So without further ado, we are going to jump into our panelists. I am just going to pin them all to the screen. Let me see, give me one moment here. Perfect. So we're going to get started here. I'm just going to start off by asking each person to give a little bit of an introduction to themselves, your names, your pronouns, what your current role or profession may be, and any other background information you'd like to provide. So I'm going to start with Ev, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Sure. So, hi everybody, my name is Ev. I use they, them, or he, him pronouns. I currently work as the operations coordinator at a school for kids on the autism spectrum, and I myself am also on the autism spectrum. Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks, Ev. And Mike, we'll have you introduce yourself next. Oh, sorry, Mike, you are on mute. Let me get you unmuted there.
Sorry about that. Sometimes I'm a little bit like bull in a china shop when I approach my speak and I jump right into the flow of things. But my name is Mike Giango. My pronouns are he, him, his. My current role profession, I work at SAP as a process management specialist. Essentially, I report on sales KPIs and analytics for certain executives. And I also am leading my own discussion group and initiative within my community, Phoenixville Community Neurodiversity Discussion, focusing on education, neurodiversity related education, accommodations from a sensory standpoint, and just overall building consensus and a compendium of resources that are visible and accessible for all as it pertains to neurodiverse community. And I'm really passionate about this cause. I'm obviously really excited to be here today. And it's an absolute pleasure to be able to speak on this panel and get to know everybody. It's going to be a good one.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. Very much appreciate having you here. And Carissa.
Hi, everyone. I hope everyone's having a great Monday so far. My name is Carissa Madden, and my pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm a disability advocate. And I have previous work experience in the nonprofit sector, higher education, employment, and disability services. And I also want to share my 5 clipped-in strengths are achiever, futuristic, belief, learner, and significance. And one of my career goals is I wanted to write and publish books. And so, again, I've been working with career services for the past couple of years.
Great. Thanks, Carissa. And last but not least, Zoe.
Hi, everyone. My name is Zoe Durazdi. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a mental health counselor and an autistic person myself. I have a private practice that specializes in serving the neurodivergent community. So pretty much all of my clients are autistic, have ADHD, other sort of neurodevelopmental and social differences. My background, in addition to the mental health field, is also in writing and disability rights advocacy. Thank you.
Awesome. I'm just so thrilled to have people from so many awesome backgrounds here today to share about your career search experience and hopefully give some insights on how we can improve that as well. So we're here today to talk about the autistic experience in career searching. So I'm going to ask if each of you could just share a bit about what your job search has looked like or currently looks like. Some things you can speak to, or maybe the barriers you see, some of the supports that have been helpful, or things you've learned about yourself while career searching. So I'm going to start with Mike.
With respect to my experience career searching, just to give a little bit of historical context, I've been at SAP in a full-time role since 2018, but my time at the company really began in 2015 when I entered in an internship capacity, fresh out of college. And a lot of my role with SAP then was coordinated by OVR, Office of Vocational Rehabilitation, an outstanding resource for sure. So my job search, I would say, was relatively streamlined overall. But what it took to get that relatively streamlined point of access to a professional opportunity via OVR is really what I want to highlight here. Because, and I'll elaborate on this later for sure, but I feel like that there's a lot of great resources out there available for the neurodiverse community when it comes to just being able to engage any professional forum and being able to articulate for yourself, advocate for yourself, and find a role that fits your skill set and your preferences well. There are resources available for that, OVR among them, and there are other individual groups for sure. But I think really the key point here is that these resources aren't necessarily always communicated in a way that they're visible and accessible to all. And there's not really great organizational flow or consensus in terms of how these are communicated within the broader community. So I would definitely say that a barrier was being able to find OVR, being able to put myself in touch with OVR, and my parents helped a lot with this. But that point of contact should be made more and more freely accessible. I would say that that was a definite barrier. And the other thing that I would like to mention is, like I said, fresh out of college, there needs to be more resources in place to help transition people from the end of an educational stage to that professional stage, because a lot of it, you might be starting your social circle over again. In addition to professional pressure now, having to provide for yourself, the marriage of those relative pain points is one that everybody has to navigate at some point in their life or another. And like I said, there are outstanding resources that are available, but I think as a community, we could do a better job communicating those resources, streamline those resources, and also developing extra resources to emphasize the life stage development of people freshly out of college or freshly out of an educational stage who are transitioning into the professional stage.
Absolutely. Huge transition there. Thanks, Mike, for all that insight. Zoe, do you have anything you'd like to say on this?
Sure. So I was diagnosed at the age of 19, which isn't unusual for autistic women. The diagnosis field is very sexist, and especially when I was a child, there wasn't the same understanding of autism in women. But throughout my life, I have been exceedingly good at masking my autism symptoms. So I can kind of pretend, perform neurotypicality for a period of time. So every job interview I've ever been on has been the masking Olympics, where for 30 minutes, an hour, however long I need to engage with these people, I'm going to pretend to be neurotypical. And I'm going to do this because I understand that a lot of the times interviews are not necessarily about qualifications, right? You have my resume for that. It's about, critical thinking. Can I answer these questions? But I think primarily a lot of it has to do with vibes, right? And like seeing if you would like to work with this person, et cetera. And in that inherently is a phenomenal amount of anti-autistic bias, because autistic people, when we are unmasked, are often like weird, right? We're clocked as someone who you can't really, I don't know, there's something odd about her type of thing. And I'm well aware that I would not be anywhere where I am today if I hadn't been masking in those interviews. I have the privilege of being able to do that, though. There are many other autistic people who are not able to mask as easily as me. And they then miss out on opportunities when they could do a phenomenal job. I was very blessed to get a wonderful position at Villanova University for my master's program. It was a scholarship position where they paid for my tuition and gave me a small salary in exchange for work as like a researcher. And that was awesome because I was able to work from home and it was just a lot easier on me. But once I graduated my master's program and I started working in a mental health field environment, things were not as easy. I could mask for the interview. I could not mask for 8.5 hours a day, 5 days a week. Too much. And so essentially, I'm very thankful for where I am presently, starting my own business. It's been immensely difficult. I started it literally like a month out of graduate school because I could smell the autistic burnout coming from a mile away. And I wanted to give myself some financial options prior to when that hit. But it's one of these situations where the field itself and the environment, it can be so overwhelming that these people, autistic people who have the potential to do a really great job, really serve your company, are not able to thrive because of the environment.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Zoe. And Carissa, I'll have you contribute next.
Sure, absolutely. So I would say overall with the facing the barriers for the career search, I would say it's unpredictable and you just don't know where you're gonna get yourself into. Like Michael was saying earlier, I wish there was more support systems who will help people with disabilities transition from college into the workforce. When it comes to school and things like that, I was able to get into my master's program at the University of Florida very quickly within 2 weeks. But when it comes to finding employment, it takes a lot longer than I hoped for. So it definitely brings a lot of mixed emotions, and you're going to face barriers because not even though my resume highlights my skills, but when you go into that interview process, you feel like everybody's looking at you, they're judging you for who you are. And I have some techniques I would love to share later on regards to helping employers recruit more people from different diverse populations. And what made me become successful along with this facing these barriers and challenges is I'm very motivated and I create different projects to help with my career development professional opportunities. And and it, career changes are going to happen if you want to go to one area, but there's times you have to go to different areas based on where you get hired to. So it's a lot of mixed emotions overall, and you just have to take it one day at a time. And I will be that's what I wanted to mention about the career search. It's just very unpredictable again.
Absolutely. It's not a straightforward process, right? And being ready for that is certainly helpful insight. So thank you, Carissa. And Ev, anything you'd like to add?
I do, yeah. I have two things coming from different directions because I had something prepared to say, but I want to pop off what Zoe was saying earlier about feeling the autistic burnout coming. I also was diagnosed at 19 following an autistic burnout where for the first time in my entire life, I failed a class. And I didn't just fail a class, I failed all those classes. So I went from being, an honor roll student to changing my major in my second year of college and like having a bunch of F's on a report card that has never happened to me before in my life. And that goes back to like the ability to mask and like play off of what my strengths are. I'm really good in an educational setting. I know how to do that. I know how to learn stuff and I know how to take a test. I know how to prove to you that I know how to do stuff. I just don't know how to look like everybody else when I do it. So that does kind of lead to like the other part where whenever I've been searching for like jobs or, a career, I would hardcore struggle with like the interviews. Or I remember in high school applying to like part-time minimum wage type jobs where they make you take a personality test as part of the like sending in your application. Like there's your resume, there's your application, and then you had to do a 30-minute personality test where you don't know what the answers are. You can kind of figure out what they want the answers to be, but that must not have been right because I never got called back. And like, I'm not looking for a job right now because where I am currently is fantastic. And part of that is, I think, because it is in the field of autism. So when I come in and look a little bit autistic while I'm in an interview, because I'm still trying to mask in this interview because I'm terrified, that they're like, oh yeah, that's just a normal thing people do. So I think as far as like supports go, it's giving a little bit of, leeway if somebody comes in and does something that, maybe isn't what you would consider a normal thing to do. Like, I never stop moving. You can't expect me to sit still, but me never stopping moving doesn't affect my work ethic any. If anything, it makes it higher because I don't ever stop.
Thanks, Ev, and thanks for sharing all of that, as well as everyone with the vulnerability and the honesty, right? I think that's so important for everyone here to hear what that experience is like and understand what might be helpful in the process. So Zoe, you're going to jump on to the next question. I know you specifically feel really passionate about using your strengths in the career search. And Carissa, I know that you have insights as someone who's currently going through this job search. So I'm going to start with Zoe. What advice do you have for those going through the job search now?
So I think that as autistic people or neurodivergent people in general, a lot of how we are defined clinically and by society is in the ways that we are less than a neurotypical person. So even if you look at the DSM diagnosis for autism, it talks about all of our deficits, the ways we differ from this alleged normal person, who I would assert does not exist. But, so there's always this idea that we have to change ourselves in order to be more neurotypical, and through being more neurotypical, it's the only way we can be successful. What I do with my clients and what I do with myself is to move in the exact opposite direction. I say, okay, so what are the things, like for myself, what are the things about me that are actually my strengths? Many of them are the things other people have considered to be my deficits. Throughout my life, I have been extremely passionate and opinionated. If I think something is morally just or unjust, I will not stop until it gets, corrected. That's something that's been really annoying for people in bureaucratic systems. It's been really great in my work as an activist. I think differently. I use language differently. That can be kind of confusing and people think I'm weird, but also it makes me into a good writer. The things that we'll criticize in an autistic child, we will celebrate in a business person. For a child, it's that they're stubborn, rigid, that they don't go with the flow. For a business person, it's that they're resilient, they persevere, right? So, reframing your understanding of yourself to realize how many of your autistic traits, be it your attention to detail, your ability to perseverate on these things, be it some of your like rigidity around thought, things like that are actually very marketable skills, as long as you're able to utilize them in an appropriate setting.
Absolutely. I love that reframing. So thank you for doing that for us and sharing that. Carissa, anything you'd like to add as somebody who's currently going through that job search?
Oh wow, thank you for the question. Overall, job searching, it's just another full-time job. And when I graduated from grad school, I was hoping to get into the higher education field, but unfortunately, I had to look at other career opportunities like nonprofit organizations or employment services. And so basically during that time, I had a good friend who was part of my support team. If you can't find a mentor overall, having a support system will help too. It could be a couple of good friends, professors, good employers who really get to know you, and also that they're gonna support you all the way. They're not gonna bring you down all the time. So I just wanted to highlight that first of all when it comes to career searches. And Also, I would create a career goals, what I want to accomplish. And of course, things change over time. It depends where you are, where you're working, and things like that. And I also recommend um, having different kinds of resumes as well too for different jobs. Like for I know people say, oh, you can't just have one type of resume. You have to have different ones that highlight your skills for that job position. So with data analyst positions, they're asking a lot of research or asking a lot of software technology, for example. When it comes to higher education, if you have experience in teaching, you want to highlight that. So it really depends on the job opportunity what you're applying for. And boy, there's times that I get a lot of headaches, especially applying for applications. It's just not fun overall. And so I also wanted to highlight that it's important to go for employment services, career services as well, because you may never know what kind of skills you're going to develop, like how to answer these certain questions in mock interviews, for example. It could be what to add on your resume, change the wording a little bit. And last but not least, I also want to recommend when it comes for job offers, a lot of times, not always, is regards to networking. So you're going to be networking, reaching out to people who have the same interests or a little bit different, and they have the career that you wish to have within the next 5 to 10 years. It really depends. And also what comes, keep in touch with your network, because you may never know if the job opportunity. I know a lot of people say, oh, you're going to basically get the job right away through network. That's not always the case. And so it's basically the way I look at it is having an open mind with an open heart. And encourage searches is like, again, having these mixed emotions. And as long as you're trying your best is all you can do.
Absolutely. Thanks, Carissa. I can't wait to hear your insights on, how we can improve that process as well, because those were such great tips from the job seeker perspective. And then we'll look at it a little later from the employer perspective as well. So I'm going to switch over to Mike here. So Mike, I know we've talked before and you feel really passionately about accommodations in the workplace and in the interview process. So what should employers and job seekers know about accommodations?
What should employers and job seekers know about accommodations? I'm going to start from the perspective of the job seeker myself, because I was in this position once upon a time. I would say with respect to accommodations, it's inherently an art form to some degree, but being able to articulate for yourself, being able to know what your strengths and your weaknesses are absolutely front and center. Don't hide your strengths, don't hide your weaknesses, and I'll get to why you don't hide either side of the coin in a little bit. But essentially, know who you are, know yourself, and be able and willing to articulate your full entire self, regardless of form and regardless of whether you think it's going to make you look good, look bad in terms of your strengths and your weaknesses. I would definitely start there. And I think also when it comes to accommodations, sensory communication, or a sensory environment that encourages maximum communication is so important. So I would definitely say this is something you want to advocate for or articulate for. If you're either in a position where you're interviewing with somebody or looking for a place to work, do they have a sensory environment that's going to maximize my ability to do my job? And when I get to the interview process, be willing to communicate, hey, these are my sensory preferences. This is how I take in information best. This is what's going to help me do what I do. And really go from there. So know how to advocate for yourself, know your strengths and weaknesses, and know the role that sensory environment is going to play in your ability to maximize your strengths in the interview process and at the job itself. From the employer standpoint, the one thing I feel like is more common than I'd like to admit, an observation over the years, it's that the process of employees requesting accommodations, or even if we go back to the educational level, students requesting accommodations, if it's not done in a discreet manner, it becomes very easily stigmatized, because people tend to see dichotomy. They tend to see difference, and they see somebody going to obtain accommodations, and a lot of people outside of that one individual are just carrying on with their normal routine or making accommodation requests publicly. It's an unfortunate part of human nature, but it's almost like that difference tends to be emphasized, and we tend to associate societally a negative connotation with that. Like they may be differently abled, they may not have a certain strength or a certain skill set that another person may have. And I think overall we need to emphasize the dialogue that, hey, requesting accommodations, it isn't a sign of weakness. It doesn't make you any less equal or any more superior, any lesser versus anybody else. It's a normal process of being able to amplify your skill set. And it's ultimately about success, driving your goals so that you can drive a team's goals, so that you can drive an organization's goals. It's honestly, in a way, for the greater good. The humility and the willingness to request accommodations should be admired, should be looked upon in a positive light. I think we need to change a little bit of stigma around that. And that starts with the very top level of communication, and employers being willing, and also educational institutions, since I mentioned education, being willing to emphasize, hey, if you request accommodations, that should be commended. And drawing it, and the subtle drawing of attention to difference can lessen with a greater emphasis from the top down on, hey, accommodations are a great tool for the individual, and they're a great tool for the organization.
Absolutely. So well said, Mike. It's all about, right, how can we make our employees successful that then makes everyone, the organization, successful. So much great insight packed into all of these answers. So thank you again. Going to move on to Ev here. I know, Ev, you're really interested in advocating for opportunities in all workplaces and all fields. So can you speak a bit to your thoughts on transferable skills and maybe, how you can apply learnings to all different fields?
Absolutely. So first statement's basically going to be, there's a lot of people here. And honestly, if any of you have been to a neurodiversity centered webinar or anything about employment, I'm sure you've heard all from like tech companies and all about STEM and all about math and science. But it's also, good to remember that that's not the only thing that people like. Autistic people are in every field, and it is important that every field and every company is prepared to support, autistic employees. Personally, my background is in art. I went to college for art. I have a degree in art. My concentration is 3D printing, which is a little techie, but it's an art degree. And that is, that's my favorite thing to do. If I wasn't able to make art, I would probably just scream. But my job right now is not art, except for when it is. So I have two roles in my job. I'm the operations coordinator, and I'm also the DEI specialist. DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so, in the diversity, equity, and inclusion, I do a lot of teaching of, our staff and faculty at the schools. And part of that is I have to design presentations, but I also design posters and things to make sure that the information I give out is available in different forms, so that the most amount of people have the opportunity to, soak in that info and really get it and understand it. So my art degree really helps me do that. In my operations coordinator role, I handle a lot of the facilities work. So I'm constantly making up, creative solutions to how to best utilize our space for our students, and even, ways to fix things quickly and safely for our students before we can get like a real fix in. That, other people may not think of. And that goes back to my art degree, but also honestly goes back to my autism, because I think of things in a different way than somebody else may. So I think it's, really important too, when you're either looking at jobs or looking to hire somebody, that you look at how their background may actually, help them in their job if it seems like it's a totally different background too. Like I would not have remotely the same approaches to how I do things in my job right now if I didn't have the schooling background that I had. I would come at it a completely different way, and it might not be, as good as I'm doing it now. Not saying I'm doing, the best job ever, but I'm doing the best I can. So I just think it's really important that you recognize people have skills from all different areas, and they can all be useful, helpful skills.
Absolutely. I love that because I speak to so many people who are coming from different fields and looking to go into a new one, and just being able to recognize that that experience has so much depth to it, and that it can be applicable across many, many different fields. So thank you for sharing that, Ev. Just a note for the audience, we do have 2 more questions and then we'll be moving on to Q&A. So I'm going to put that link once more. If you want to submit questions, you can do so there, and we'll get to that after this. So we're going to jump back to everyone here. One thing we often talk about is the idea of self-hacks or things that are helpful, that could be helpful for other people. So what advice do you have for job seekers on getting, keeping, and succeeding in your particular job setting? So you can speak to general advice or suggest specific actions or tools that you think are helpful. So I'm going to start off with Zoe.
Sure. So I think that it's very important to understand the ways in which your brain differs, and like the specific needs that you might have. So I often say that there are a million examples in the world of how to exist as a neurotypical person. When we look at the media and the kind of popular examples of how to exist as an autistic person, not great, right? Often we're like the butt of jokes in the media. We're just not portrayed particularly well. It's hard to see any examples of how to thrive. I think just accepting that, you might need more time to rest after a certain activity. You might have different levels of energy at different times of the day. You might have different sensory needs. These things are morally neutral. They don't make you a worse candidate than anybody else or a worse person. It doesn't reflect on your character. It's just a fact of your existence. In a very similar way to how, individuals with a physical disability might need different accommodations, and that's fine. So, when we look at finding jobs, we want to really think about, is this environment one in which I have like autonomy, where I can kind of have my needs met, or where things can be a little bit more open to what I need? So for myself, I know that I cannot be working 5 days a week outside of the house. Does not work for me. And so like respecting that as just a prerequisite. And then also really trying to ask questions in the interview about the culture of that institution. Places that are, even if you can speak to somebody who like already works there, an employee outside the interview process, of course, that would be like the best case scenario, to really determine if this is going to be a place where you can thrive. We as neurodivergent people have so much to offer. We have so many strengths. I think that sometimes it's almost like, oh, okay, we're going to include you because we're doing you a favor. You're not being done a favor, right? You're valuable. And you can make a company strong in ways that other people can't. So you have just as much power in this dynamic as the neurotypical people who might be presiding over a certain situation. And you should come at it from that perspective, because you kind of deserve to live a life that is robust and happy, and that you can thrive in. And if a certain office culture, if a certain environment is not going to do that for you, then that's a situation that you have the power to just excuse yourself from. Yeah.
Great advice, Zoe. Thank you so much for that. Carissa, what do you think?
That's advice for job seekers. It's very tricky overall. It really depends on what's your career goals overall. I don't have the best answer, but I have some suggestions. So basically, continue applying for jobs, continue to network. One thing I would definitely recommend when applying for a lot of jobs overall, make sure you have time for yourself, because applying for jobs, looking for employment is another full-time job, and you could get overstimulated very quickly. I was diagnosed with autism at the age of 4 years old, so I was not was able to mask my disability at the time. As I got older, I was able to. So also just think about what your career goals, continue to network, asking for your friends if they have any suggestions. And if you can't find the job, focus on creating your own projects to highlight your skills. Another thing I'm currently working on is starting my own business. As a disability advocate, I wanted to provide resources to the community. It could be in higher education, recreation, business, and that in general. And for me, it's really no right or wrong answer regarding to advice for job seekers, because you can be doing the right thing and still not get the job as well. So I hope people understand about what my input is, because it's basically, it could be different things going on at once.
Absolutely, Carissa. Thank you. I think that's so interesting too with entrepreneurship, and Zoe also started her own private practice. Just a whole nother conversation we could have there as well. All right, Mike, anything you'd like to add to this?
With respect to job seekers on being hired, maintaining their roles, and not only maintaining their roles, but succeeding in their roles, I would say, coming back to what I said earlier, just an emphasis on what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses. Not only that, the humility and the ability to reflect is absolutely so critical. And furthermore, establishing relationships, find those people you trust, and being willing to communicate, reflect, utilize those people as a sounding board. All of that is essential. And the last thing I would absolutely say on that front is succeeding in your particular job setting. Success might be different benchmarks. Obviously, they may be business oriented, they may be personal oriented. Everybody has a different definition of success. But knowing how to calibrate the definition of success, and not let success in one area result in failure in another, and being able to balance out those successes, being able to be a jack of all trades. Even if you're, I'm not going to say a master of none, because obviously you want to strive for excellence, but being able to be balanced, being able to really emphasize our neuroplasticity of the brain's ability to process different responsibilities in different states, emphasize that, and really keep yourself grounded, keep yourself educated in different areas, and be willing to be flexible, malleable, and adaptable as circumstances present themselves. And I think really that's a blueprint for success in the workplace.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mike. And Ev, you're up.
All right, that's a hard crew to follow. I say everything that all three of my colleagues previous have said, absolutely fantastic. Yes. I want to particularly just touch on, self-hacking kind of thing. This is really how I run my life. I know how I work better than anybody else knows, just like you know how you work better than anybody else. You know yourself. So you know what you need to do to be able to succeed and get things done. An example of that being, I cannot do anything without a deadline. And some exterior pressure, right? So if I'm given a date, and I'm usually given a deadline, like here's when this thing needs to be done by, I'm going to change it in my calendar to 3 days earlier. Because then I'll see, oh, okay, I really have to get that done. And then I'm not actually doing it at the last minute. It's ahead of schedule. Everybody's happy. I told my own brain that it was due 3 days earlier so that I actually did it, not at the last minute. Because I need that sort of, pressure to actually make my brain want to do anything. Or, you know, I know that I don't know how to take notes. I never learned how to take notes. And I'm not the best at following verbal directions. So a lot of the people I work with know this, and they will just give me already written out the list of things I need to do and then go over it with me verbally, because that's what they need to make sure that I know what I'm doing, although I'm probably just good with the list. But if I do not get that list, I am going to make one extremely quickly after this meeting and email it to whoever that meeting was with and be like, just to double check, this list is correct. And then I have it there in writing. I don't have to remember. But you know, things like that, or setting alarms to remember to do stuff. Look, everybody should get a smartwatch. I'm just saying it. My smartwatch runs my life. All I have is a Fitbit, and not even a fancy one, but it's fancy enough that I get texts on it. And so I will text myself something and it'll buzz on my hand, and I'll go, okay, yeah, we're going to do that now, because now I have been like physically prompted to do it by something on my body. But you know, just as a job seeker or job haver, just like knowing the things that you'll need in your own brain to like get your work done, especially once you're in a job, is extremely helpful, because it's not always going to work out that you can, you know, rely on somebody else to make sure you're doing what you need to do. And a lot of jobs prefer you to be mostly self-sufficient. Yeah.
Those are so great. I also am someone who sets alarms to remind me of everything I have to do. So I really love the idea of the physical reminder too. I haven't heard that one before. I just want to open it up. If Ev's ideas prompted anything in any of the other panelists that you'd like to share as something you've found to be helpful, I just want to open the floor there, but it's okay if not.
Yes. So I have like a big thing with needing to sort of like respect my own executive functioning stuff when it comes to, so like a lot of the times neurodivergent people will have issues with executive functioning, which is like this big umbrella term that covers a lot of stuff regarding how to respond to task demands. And a lot of the times I think that people assume that we're not doing something because we're either lazy, or because we don't want to, or because we don't know how to manage our time or something. Really, the research indicates that it's an issue of not being able to manage our emotional response to the task demand. So like I have to send 2 emails and then I can go to bed, and I'm like, like for some reason, it's like hitting a wall. I literally cannot be sending these 2 emails right now. So I'm pacing around, just kind of stimming. My dog is like, what's wrong? I'm like, I don't even know. You know, I just get upset. And so I have to really like kind of pay attention to consistently like maintaining my calm, my emotional state, keeping in mind that like a bunch of stuff that other people would not find particularly taxing or upsetting, like just being in a room with fluorescent lights, is taxing and upsetting for me. And like working, you know, with the natural systems of my body for that. A lot of the times I rely on routine so that I'm never actually making a choice. Like my entire morning, hours worth of stuff, getting up, taking the dog out, going to the gym, etc., is so automated and routine that like I can't actually tell you if I brushed my teeth, in the sense that I have no recollection of doing that. I was listening to a podcast, but I know I did brush my teeth, right? Because my mouth doesn't taste bad, and because I always do that without thinking about it. So the more that you can take the load off of your mind and place your attention on things that are either fun for you, or on keeping yourself emotionally regulated, the less you're going to come up against, you know, decision fatigue, where you have to be constantly choosing things, and that's exhausting for your brain. And the less you're going to come up against these emotional distress barriers to meeting task demands.
Absolutely. I love that. I don't know if anybody read the Steve Jobs book, but that was actually one thing, wore the same outfit every day to reduce that decision-making capacity, something as small as that, right? I love that thought. All right, so we're going to move on to our last question, and it's just a short little one. So if employers today leave knowing one thing they can do to make the career search process more inclusive for autistic job seekers, what would it be? And we're actually going to start with Zoe again here. So the one thing.
I think that really it's to make the interview process less about, who comes off as the way that you stereotypically think of like a successful employee, which, because of our culture and the world that we live in, will be inherently biased, by your own neurotypical standards for things, and also just by other systems of oppression like racism and sexism. And instead, to formulate your interview questions to be one, pretty straightforward in the way that they're worded, and two, to be more about like critical thinking and seeing, how this person's brain would work in regards to like real and practical issues with the job at hand, than it is about, trying to determine if this person has these certain attributes that you think of as like leadership attributes or something like that, because those are often expressed differently by neurodivergent people. We could be somebody who's really great and really confident. The more diverse workplace, actually, the more likely it is for that company to be profitable. Many studies have determined that. But if your interview process is kind of really trying to weed out people who are different, and you really have to self-reflect on how much of that is also your own standards and things you place on yourself and on other people just in your life, then you're going to wind up with a pretty homogenous group, and that's not going to be fun for really anyone.
Awesome. Thank you, Zoe. Carissa, what do you think?
All right, so that's I have several suggestions, first of all. And just to kind of go back a little bit in history, I was working with Soho Square Solutions. I was the neurodiversity partnership / community manager. So my role was to recruit candidates with disabilities who want to work in the financial services. And so with this position, I learned about myself more when it comes to recruiting candidates. I know a lot of jobs ask for many, many years of experience, but for me, I look at other experiences, which are volunteer opportunities or your school projects counts as job experience. I think 3 months would be much more appropriate than asking for 1 to 5 years, because a lot of students who recently graduated from school have very little work experience, about none. And so it's important to offer the accessibility to all the candidates. And I also wanted to share, while I was working with the University of Florida with the Office of Accessibility, Gender Equity. And so the project I had to work on was basically, how can human resources departments or talent selections can recruit more candidates from various diverse populations. So the goal overall is to create inclusive recruiting effective strategies. And one of the things I always recommend is and if this person needs accommodations or recommendations for support, definitely give it to them for sure, because they know themselves more than anyone else. And yeah, it's a lot overall when it comes to like finding people. It's like, because I've been as a job seeker and before working as an employer, as a recruiter. So there's different, like, I feel overall, it's just get to know the individual, get to know the job seeker. You may never know, even if they have very work experience, just give them the opportunity. And just not think about what their differences are. You got to think of their skills as well, too. That makes them very unique. So I hope that answers the question.
Absolutely. Setting people up for success should be all of our goal, right? All right, Ev, On to you.
All right. So I want to bounce off what both Zoe and Carissa have said, with something that we try to do when we're hiring new staff at my place of employment, which is that normally when you're hiring somebody, you're looking for someone who's going to be a good fit, who's going to fit in, with your company, who's going to fit in with your culture. But instead of when you're hiring somebody and they're in the interview process and all that, if they've made it to the interview process, you've seen their resume, you know that they have the skills you're looking for, or you wouldn't have called them in to interview. So instead of looking for someone who's going to fit, who's going to have the same ideas as everybody else, look for somebody who's going to be an addition. So instead of someone who's going to fit in, who's going to think similarly, who's going to behave similarly to everybody already there, find somebody who's going to come in and knows how to do what you're doing. Because again, if you're looking at their resume and stuff, they have the skills you need, but someone who's going to come in and give a new spin to things, a new way of thinking. Because again, like what with Zoe was saying earlier, that having a more diverse team adds, more to your business. This is a good way to start doing that, because as you get more people all together who have different ways of thinking and different backgrounds and different, knowledge, they're going to come in and propose new ways of doing things that maybe way more efficient, or just something you never would have thought of that ends up being, I don't know, the next iPhone. But you'd never know if everybody was this like homogenous group.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ev. And to close us out here, Mike, what are your thoughts on this one?
I think one thing we can emphasize to make the search process more inclusive for autistic job seekers, I think an emphasis on sensory accommodations. And I think two, realizing that it's less about what exactly the original requirements for any given role are, and it's more about the overall holistic skill set and character of the person that you're looking at. So essentially, more person first than role first. I think the overall dialogue and approach towards hiring needs to be changed on that front as well. So I think it's partially an emphasis on dialogue regarding how we go about hiring, person first versus role first. And it's also an emphasis on accommodations, making sure that people who are tackling the job search are comfortable articulating their true selves, and making sure that you're putting them in position to be at ease and to be able to articulate their true selves more easily.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all so much for these insights. We do have a few questions, and if we don't get to your question today, I will follow up and make those connections, get some answers for you as well. But I think we have the time to touch on one or two before we close out here. I am set to stopping right at 2. So one question that has been upvoted here, right, is what kinds of questions can someone ask about the culture to show how neurodiversity friendly the company or office is?
I think questions like how flexible are the managers here when it comes to things like needing to take breaks at different times. Like, for example, I once worked at a job where they wanted us to come in at 8:30 and leave at 5, which was fine. But they meant that in the most literal way possible, as in they were timing you. And if you wanted to come in like a little earlier and and it was very rigid, and it didn't really make any sense because it didn't make anybody any better at their jobs, and there was nothing about the job that would require that it needs to be like that specific. It was just like a control thing. Right? Or making sure that the company views your well-being as a priority by asking questions about like what their healthcare policies are like, how many days off of like medical leave they have, how much you're able to work from home if that's something that you need. And then also, as you're like being taken in, like look around you. right? Is this like a place where you feel like there's a lot of like different types of people? Or is this a place where it's like almost exclusively like finance bros or something like that? Like, like a culture that's extremely homogenous, that it's not going to be a situation you thrive in.
I would say too, off of, look around, if during your interview, you're given the opportunity to like tour the building, look at the stuff. Like at people's desks, is everybody's desk just a blank slate with nothing on it? Are you allowed to have stuff on the desks? Is everybody sitting in the exact same office chair? Do some people have standing desks and some people have desks that go in between, or are they all the same? Like, are you expected to sit in the same office chair as everyone else at the same desk? Or can you say, I need this kind of like chair or space? And then I'm seeing in the chat that somebody also asked, how do you look around when it comes to remote? Which I don't know physically how you would look around, but I could say you could ask questions too, like, well, what kind of, what does the setup look like for your typical, worker? Are you tracking my mouse movements? If my mouse doesn't move for 5 minutes, are you going to wonder where I am? Because I know, like, for myself, when I'm working on something, I will either get like hyper focused and zoomed in on it and then forget to eat for 6 hours, and all of a sudden it's 4 o'clock and time to go home. Or I'll get frustrated and have to get up and take a walk, but I always come back. But like getting up and taking the walk, I'm still working, I'm thinking through the process. So it's like, is that sort of thing, acceptable? Like those sort of questions you could ask.
Absolutely. Those are just fantastic insights and really well translated into the virtual world. I hadn't thought about that, Ev. So thank you so much. And just one big thank you to all of our panelists here today for sharing their time and expertise with us, and for all of you for joining us. I will be sending out a follow-up email that will touch on some of the highlights of this, as well as answer some of those questions you might have. So please do look for that. And if you're new to us here, you can certainly find us on LinkedIn, on our website, nenphl.org, and we'd be thrilled to connect you in any way we can. But thank you for being here. Oh, there we go. And there we have some contact information in the chat as well. All right. Thank you all.
Kate, can you send my contact info? My chat is stuck on direct message. Thank you.
Did I get that correctly?
Yes.
Great. So that's Ev's contact. That's from the top of my head. That is pretty good. All right. Awesome. Have a great day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.